Hi, everyone, and welcome to Purple Coach Conversations with Anne and Tanya. I'm Anne.
And I'm Tanya.
So, our goal is to normalize, educate, and inspire conversations around diversity and inclusion. And so Tanya and myself are both coaches, mothers, and entrepreneurs. We're not diversity experts, but we aim to have conversations with people that are interested and have something interesting to say about their journeys and their experiences around diversity and inclusion. So today, as our first guest on the series, we're very privileged and excited to welcome Sheela Sharma, who is joining us.
Hi, Bo.
Hello, thanks for being with us. Sheela worked for 15 years in the financial industry. She's a very special lady and merits a special introduction. She's the founder of Opsion, a consultancy supporting leaders to grow businesses at critical stages of their development. She's also the chair of Portobello Business Center, a non-profit organization supporting individuals from start to up level. And she's also an editor and mentor of SEO London, a non-profit organization working with talented students from ethnic minorities to help them in their journey. She's currently working on a book, 101 Diversity and Inclusion Success Stories, that hopes to become a tool for corporate, and it includes success stories and actionable steps to use as reference in the workplace. Sheela, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Sheela, we've introduced you, but it's hard to be brief as there's so much to say about all the topics that you're working on. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about yourself, your path, and where you are today?
Okay, so to tell you about where I've come from, my family were an immigrant family. They came to England from India in the 60s, and it was made very clear to us as children early on that education was the route out of the hardship, that particularly financial hardship that was associated with being an immigrant. And so I studied a lot. I was the first in my family to go to university. I'm a neuroscientist and I have a PhD in brain imaging. And having studied for a PhD, I had always thought that I would take an academic route. But when I got to the end of that PhD, I decided that I wanted a taste of the corporate world. And so I took what I had learned and I entered into the world of investment banking. Initially, I was an equity analyst and I was looking for the bank I worked with at companies that make imaging equipment. And I did that for 6 or 7 years. And then later on, I decided to change my career path slightly and I became a divisional COO within those same investment banks. So as you said, Tanya, I did that for 15 years. And then having done that, more recently, I decided that I wanted to have a go at starting my own company. So taking my COO background, I decided to start a startup called Opsion, as you mentioned. And what Opsion does is it provides operational and strategic support to fast-growing SMEs at that critical stage when they're jumping up to the next level and they need a bit of extra support. And that's what I'm doing now. And you also mentioned that I'm the chair of the Portobello Business Center, which helps individuals from less advantaged backgrounds start their own businesses and social enterprises. And I think you also mentioned that I'm the editor of 101 Diversity and Inclusion Success Stories, which I'm working on for the non-profit SEO London.
Very busy days you must have with all these fantastic projects, and we wanted to hear more specifically about SEO London, and you gathering fantastic stories from individuals, and we wanted to share with our audience maybe a particular example or a success story and why corporate would benefit from getting this 101 Diversity and Inclusion Success Story book that you're working on.
So thank you. So SEO London, or Sponsors for Educational Opportunity, is a wonderful non-profit that, as I said earlier, takes talented students from either ethnic minority or low socioeconomic backgrounds in the UK and helps to give them that introduction to some of the top industries from finance to law to healthcare, that historically this group of individuals haven't necessarily had the best access to, because those organizations aren't or haven't been particularly diverse. And by doing this, it helps them with their own career success. Just over a year ago, the CEO of SEO London, Andrew Fairbairn, and I were having a conversation about the need for actionable ideas to provide to corporates to help them with their own diversity and inclusion journeys. And so after a couple of coffees, we came up with this idea of 101 Diversity and Inclusion Success Stories, which is a compilation of stories from both individuals and corporates that have successfully, in one way or another, managed to improve their diversity and inclusion situation. And that could be in any number of ways. It could be around gender, it could be around race, it could be around disability, and across a broad range of professions as well, as I mentioned earlier, from law to healthcare to finance. A particular story that sticks out for me is one that you can see posted on LinkedIn at the moment. It's from a lawyer called Michael Smith, who works at the law firm Ashurst, who is 80% blind in both eyes, and the steps he took to help support his own progress within that firm by working with them. So Ashurst and Michael together came up with a passport, which essentially helped him as he progressed from one part of the firm to the other. It did two things. It first normalized conversations around disability, and it secondly, this passport removed the need for him to explain his needs and requirements to be able to do his job as he moved through his career. So anytime he moved, the new team or the new division were given this passport, and they immediately knew what he needed. And I think that was a fantastic, very small step, but something that helped him tremendously and helped others to be open about his needs.
And that's really powerful. And I think there's such a learning lesson in there as well for other companies to be able to do such small shifts, but it has such a huge impact on the person who's being supported by whatever practices are being put in place.
I think you're absolutely right, Anne, and I think there hasn't ever been a greater demand for actionable ideas around diversity and inclusion than there has around the events that have happened this summer. And I think a lot of individuals feel that a lot of pledges and promises have been made, and now they need to see exactly how that change is going to happen. And these are a huge myriad of stories from a myriad of different people with a myriad of different circumstances. The resources are all free, and any individual or any organization can take one of those stories or an element of those stories and implement them within their own organizations.
And this passport idea, which is an incredible idea, even if it's a very simple idea, if you think about it, have other people showed interest in doing the same thing? As that inspired other corporates?
I think it's a little bit difficult to know what the outcomes will be, because it's a little bit early and we only posted that story a few weeks ago. But what I can tell you is that both Michael and I have been inundated with people who have contacted us as a result of that story and asked questions about how he went about it and how it actually worked. And I think that's a fantastic starting point.
Indeed, indeed. And it can be for any other disability as well. I have a client who has a hearing disability, and she's suffered all her life to having to explain to people, and people forgetting that she has this disability, because she is able to read lips, and she doesn't talk about it, and she's been used to navigating with this disability. But if people can know and understand, because I think that in our conversations with Anne, what we've realized is that very often, because of fear of difference and because of fear of diversity, we don't talk about topics that are super important, and it's just not knowing that makes us uncomfortable and makes us on the spot. And you can see the body language. Yesterday I watched actually someone very senior in banking talking and asking questions to another individual who had written a book, and when it came to diversity, I felt that he was uncomfortable, and you can see the body language changing because you're scared to say the wrong thing. And as a woman, you know, they were talking about diversity as male and women in the workspace, and I could feel as a woman the discomfort. And that doesn't mean that he's not working towards diversity, but it's just that discomfort. And and I guess your book is going to help to fight that discomfort. And
I think that's another wonderful thing that these stories can do. They are conversation breakers. I spoke with somebody this morning actually who said that she had shared some of the stories with some of her work colleagues during a book club. And instead of discussing the normal book, they decided to discuss the story. And she said it was one of the best book clubs that they'd ever had, because, you know, there is a lot of fear. There is fear on the part of the individual who has the story to share, and there is fear about saying the right thing from the people who are listening. And I think we have to start that conversation somewhere. And I think these stories are a fantastic way of starting that conversation.
yes.
Yes. The other thing I have to say on that with the stories, and I think that is so important, you know, you mentioned as well that this is not the first time we've had discussions about how the injustice or diversity and the need for change and so on. But a lot of people get stuck in okay, then how do I do it? And here you are giving examples of this is how you can make change. And I think there is no more excuses. For one, it cuts out the excuses. You have no reason not to make the changes that you need to make. And second of all, with such a simple idea as the passport ideas, it also tells people it doesn't need to be some huge, groundbreaking, scientific, idea that has never been accomplished in life. How about we start with the smaller things and just think of how can I make this individual's life better and help and support them in the workplace or in life and in general. So I think it's a fantastic idea.
You're absolutely right, Anne. I mean, some of the stories have involved individuals putting forums and communities together and collecting large amounts of data to prove that there is a problem. But that's not the majority of the stories. The majority of the stories are individuals implementing very simple ideas. And, I don't think this is rocket science. I think this is largely having an awareness of what you can do. And by people sharing their own stories, I think it helps everyone.
Normalizing, which is one of our goals as well in public conversation. And what I'd like to invite the audience is to check Sheela's LinkedIn, because she's publishing stories, individual stories directly there of the future book. So you can already get to know the different ideas from the book.
Thank you.
The next question we had was about, as a woman of color in what is obviously a very white male dominant industry, and I'm going back to your time in the finance industry specifically, and you spend a good portion of your life there. I would say 14 years is significant. What lessons, and specifically as a woman of color, would you like to share with others from that experience? So specifically navigating and surviving in what is a very male dominant industry. And what are the main takeaways from that journey? And if you'd like to share any tips for your audiences.
Really good question, Anne. I think having come from a scientific background, I wasn't from a finance background. I didn't really know anything about finance until I came into banking. But I also didn't know how the corporate world worked, because coming from the background I came from, there wasn't anybody who worked in the corporate world. So there was no one to advise or guide. And I think if I had been smarter, one of the things I would have done very early on was to find a sponsor and to understand the difference between sponsorship and mentorship. I think it's very well known that women and ethnic minorities are over-mentored, but we certainly don't have enough sponsors. And I didn't really understand the difference between them. A mentor is somebody who advises, but a sponsor is somebody who sees your potential and really helps you to propel your career. And I think if you can find a sponsor, particularly in a corporate profession where there isn't very much diversity, if you can find that individual who sees what you have and they are pushing you forward, I think that can help you massively. It can help your career, and it can also help you to navigate as a woman all of the obstacles that you would have to deal with, particularly around gender, and if you are a woman of color, around race as well.
And I think that's a really good distinction you've made there between a sponsor and a mentor, because a lot of the times we hear about mentorship, we hear about finding coaches, we hear about, but not a lot about mentorship. So that's really good insight, I think, for a lot of people.
I wasn't aware really of that subtle difference, to be honest. And I worked in finance as well, and I thought they were the same. But you're highlighting that they're really fundamentally different, and that's one of your main takeaway as a woman of color in the financial industry, in the white dominating industry.
And I think they both have their place, mentorship and sponsorship. And I think particularly when you're younger, the whole mentorship process works really, really well. But it's when you want to advance your career, it's when you want to move to the next stage, what can really, really help is a sponsor. And I think throughout my 15-year career in finance, I was never offered a mentor or a sponsor. And I think when I went to look for those people, I didn't feel that there were people I could approach, because I was in an industry that was really homogeneous, and there really weren't very many people like me who I felt I could approach. There weren't many people of color, and there really weren't many women.
Is that what SEO is aiming to be?
That's one of the things that SEO London does, is it takes individuals who have had successful careers and are diverse in one way or another, and introduces them to students who, as I said, come from either low socioeconomic or ethnic minority backgrounds, and helps them by the senior successful person speaking to those individuals and telling them, you know, the steps that they took and how they navigated their career path. And, you know, what does an interview at a big bank look like even? You know, if you don't have people in your family who come from those backgrounds, how are you going to know? And all those other individuals who do have family members or connections from that background, and they have a bit of an advantage over you just simply because you don't know what to expect. So SEO London helps prepare students for this by introducing them to those successful individuals within corporate professions who are willing to share their experiences.
That is great. It is, as coaches, Anne and myself, we relate a lot to that. And when George Floyd happened in May, I realized that, you know, that as a coach, as a white coach, sometimes you don't realize that you are trained to coach people that look like you. And I think it is important to have this awareness and this curiosity and become better coaches and becoming better humans, and realizing that, you know, you're not getting any better by just understanding what you already know, and you need to look outside of what you already know. And that's how we came across Purple Coach Conversation. We decided to do that, to kind of make sure that we had those conversations. And I guess SEO allows, you know, those graduates, those students, to be heard and seen and understood, because it's this understanding that is, I think, is really missing out in those big corporates where there's not a lot of minority. And just this understanding and this breaking this kind of barrier, it's allowing that.
It really is the perfect platform for connecting both the corporates who do want to improve their, you know, their recruitment around diversity and inclusion, and it's the perfect platform for the students who feel that this is a place that they are welcome, that somebody understands the obstacles that they are having to jump across that maybe others aren't, and is supporting them in that. So I really do think it's the perfect platform to marry the corporate world with diversity and inclusion.
I think it's beautiful work that you're doing. For me, it reminds me of the concept of white privilege. You know, like you talked about, if you were not born into that upper middle class, you know, typically, let's call a spade, white family that usually has the successful financial background, experience, etc. It's way, or if you talk about law firms, and there are certain firms that are definitely more, you know, white or male white dominant. It's harder to get your foot in there and to kind of understand the world, to see yourself fitting in that world. And in a way, you're kind of giving them the privilege as well by putting them in there to begin with without having to jump all these other hurdles. I mean, of course, I'm not saying that you're putting them in there without the merits that they need to have, but just that kind of support, I think, kind of adds a privilege to them that they otherwise did not have.
I absolutely agree, and I think from a student perspective, if I go back to my own student times and when I was thinking about hitting the workplace, I think it can be quite overwhelming when you walk into an interview room and the only people interviewing you are white males. And you do question, where do I see myself in this organization? And I think if someone can support you along that journey, as SEO London does, I think that can go a really long way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for this. There was an article that we read recently, as we are, which interviewed you. It was a great article where you actually talked about women having it all. We loved your response, and we wondered if you could talk to our audience about it.
Oh, thank you very much. So that was an article by Hannah Anderson, as you said, of As We Are. And I think the question she asked was, do you think it's really possible to have it all? And I think when I read the question, the first image that came to my mind as a woman was a woman that had a lot of perfects around her, a woman that had the perfect high-flying executive career, a woman that had the perfect husband, the perfect children, the perfect house, the perfect social life, one person that was achieving all of this simultaneously. And I think it's a really good question to ask ourselves. There's a difference between what society thinks having it all means to a woman and what having it all means to each of us. And I would say that once you've addressed the question of what having it all means to you as a woman, you probably need to prioritize which bit of that pie you can have at different parts in your life. And I can certainly say for me, no matter how hard I've tried, having it all in one go wasn't the answer. It was a complete disaster to try and do that. So you have to decide, you have to portion, you have to set yourself goals and tasks, and you have to ask yourself, well, which of those is conceivable now? Which of these can I realistically do now, without beating myself up and without at the end of it feeling like a complete failure because I haven't ticked all of those boxes? And I think, when I think of having it all, and I think of a woman in my mind, the image that comes up that society has created is very different to the image of when I think of a man having it all. Very, very, when you think of the woman, she's got all these other responsibilities. But when I personally think of a man having it all, there is none of this other maybe baggage. There are no children, there are no wife. It's a man with a flashy car living in a penthouse. That's the image that comes to my mind. It may not be the case for everybody, but that's the image that comes to my mind. And so I think we put really unrealistic pressures on women that can really hammer self-esteem. And so I think we all need to go back and ask ourselves as an individual, is that the having it all that I want? Or what does my having it all look like?
I absolutely loved your response, Sheela, on that when I read the article. And for me, it was just like such an aha moment where I went, a lot of us women need to hear this, especially a lot of women who are kind of go-getters, high achievers. We're taught you need to do X, Y, and Z, but you still need to be a great mother, wife, etc., etc. Put a hat on for whatever other label that society wants you to carry on. Mm-hmm. And I love the way you broke it down by at what stage of your life are you at to be having it, kind of looking at what first of all, what is it to have it all for you as an individual? cut out the norms and cut out society shoulds and shouldn'ts. And then second of all, looking at the stage of your life as well. Because if you're, perhaps in your early 20s and starting off your career, having it all might not mean having the babies, if you want babies, of course. While further on in life, that might be more of a priority to you than in your 20s and so on. And just kind of reevaluating the stage of your life really matters. And I think it's such a good takeaway for a lot of us who are living in a society where everything is just like, go get it, everything is about high achieving, everything is about success, and the amount of pressure we put on ourselves sometimes, it just leads to burnout. And it's not surprising that so many people are suffering from burnout in this day and age.
I think so. I think having a breakdown or having a burnout or having a nervous breakdown is not on anyone's list of having it all. And so I think being realistic and being pragmatic about what you can do and when you can do it is the key, certainly for me. And look, if you can have it all, then good for you. But I don't really think that's the majority of us.
Yeah, but like you said, having it all is the image. It depends what image you have. What's the energy that you have behind your goal? If your goal is having it all, what is that goal exactly? And I love this analogy from Stephen Covey when he says that you need to be the leader of your life rather than the manager of your life, right? And to be able to be the leader of your life, you gotta create a distance, between yourself and your life, because you're so drawn in the day-to-day, and that's when you get the burnout, that you're not able to take that distance to pause and understand, look back before you look forward. And that's what we're doing now at the end of the year. That's what we should be doing even more in 2020 after this difficult year. It's kind of pausing and reevaluating what we want to keep or getting rid of. And that's having it all, is being more self-aware, being more compassionate, and taking the time to take that distance. But it's tricky when you have children and you have to make an income, or you're a single mother and you're secluded from your family, or there's a lot of obstacles at times.
I think you're right. I think it's a juggling act at the best of times, especially when you get to the stage of having a family, if that's what you choose to do. And there is that constant fight in your head of wanting a career or wanting children and all the other things that you might want to do. But I think, as I said, prioritizing which of those that you can spend more time on or which you can do practically now is really important.
Exactly. So just to sum it up as we come towards the end, we like to give our viewers a little bit more of a personal view of you, Sheela. And so what we've done is we've created a few fire questions, if you like. Is that okay for you? We'll just
go for it.
All right, brilliant. So the first one is, who would you recommend that our listeners follow or listen to?
Follow, I can't think of anybody I would recommend that they follow, but listen, I would say, listen to multiple people, challenge yourself and listen to different perspectives, and really listen to the people who disagree with you. I think they're great at challenging your perspectives, but ultimately, I think, listen to yourself.
Okay, I like that. And what's your favorite quote?
My favorite quote is, don't take criticism from people you wouldn't take advice from.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a very good one. I think we're all very guilty of doing that. That's a really good one. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book is this one here. It's a very battered up copy of Bury Me Standing by Isabel Fonseca. It's an anthology of Romani people who really are a minority group.
Okay, interesting. And last one, your favorite food?
Sushi, easy.
Oh, that was quick. Easy one.
We'll ask you for the restaurant name after recording.
No problem. No problem.
Thank you so much, Sheela. Could you tell our audience where they can connect with you and find you?
So please feel free to go on to LinkedIn, Dr. Sheela Sharma. And if you follow me there, you'll also be able to see the stories from 101 Diversity and Inclusion success stories that are released weekly. And you can also there see the links to the website where other stories are also posted, and hopefully take something away from those.
Great. Please do.
Brilliant.
Please give Sheela a follow and make sure you check her work. And thank you everyone for listening. And we will be in touch with you for the next with the next guest. So make sure you register to our newsletter on our website, and you follow us on our Instagram, on our Facebook, so you can receive news on this episode, notes of this episode, and the following episodes as well.
All right, brilliant. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tanya and Anne, for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Pleasure's ours, Sheela. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.